In the lives of men and nations, 1/4 of 1 hour, 15 minutes, is a tiny span of time. Yet 15 minutes is time enough for many things to happen. Perhaps it is enough time to measure the distance between office and home. It is enough time for a moment of worship. It is enough time for a beginning. It is enough time for recreation. Enough time to end something. 15 minutes is one thing in times of peace, another in time of war. In the event of war, an enemy would have to destroy our strategic forces, our tactical forces, our cities, and our people on one attack. And the chances are that the enemy would strike us from the north. To those responsible for the defense of our civilization, 15 minutes could be the priceless interim between the first alarm of approaching enemy missiles and the counterstrike of our own forces. To get this 15 minutes of warning time, the United States has formed a partnership with the members of the free world. A partnership that guards the transpolar route against attack. The Arctic is one of the most forbidding territories on the Earth. Looking in any direction, you get the feeling that man does not belong on this icy rim of the world. The evidence is all around. The vastness, the emptiness, the loneliness, the glow of unnatural colors, the extremes of soundlessness. Soundlessness that fills the intervals between screaming winds that can whip snow into drifts higher than a barn in minutes. For about 3 months in the Arctic winter, the sun does not rise. And for 4 months in the summer, it does not set. Temperatures rise to only some 65 degrees in that brief summer moment, and dip to 65 degrees below zero for seemingly an endless winter. But startling as it may be, men have been living in the Arctic, fighting the cold, the winds, the darkness for thousands of years. And now, to guard us against possible attack over the pole, modern men from cities like Dallas and Atlanta, men from states like Oregon and New York, men from Denmark and the United States have learned also to live in the Arctic. They have moved in to build, maintain, and operate the most spectacular warning systems in the world. Warning systems that will track the paths of intercontinental ballistic missiles and the flights of manned bombers. Among the electronic eyes of the North that never close are the great radars of the Ballistic Missile Early Warning System, called BMEWS. This system is maintained by Radio Corporation of America through Air Force contract. Each big detection radar of BMEWS is larger than a football field standing on its side. And the tracking antenna is housed in a protective radome 140 feet in diameter. The complete installation is as tall as a 15-story building. These radars are among the greatest construction feats in history. And they can detect an object as small as a house door at a range of 1,500 nautical miles. This is roughly the distance from Washington, D.C. to El Paso, Texas. The BMEWS radars send out carefully calibrated beams of pulsed radar energy at 2 elevations above the Earth. These form 2 horizontal detection fans, one above the other. If a missile passes through the lower fan, radar pulses bounce back from it and its position is detected. Seconds later, the missile will pass through the upper fan. From these 2 points, track, velocity, and impact area are instantly and automatically figured by the BMEWS electronic computers. Their electronic memory systems store recollections of every missile, spacecraft, or piece of satellite debris that has come within its range. There are 3 BMEWS sites. The Thule, Greenland site is linked with one in Fylingdales Moor, England, and another in Clear, Alaska. The BMEWS site at Clear, Alaska is in an isolated area northeast of Mount McKinley. This site provides the detection capability for the west side of the United States and Canada, overlapping the edge of the radar originating from Thule, Greenland. The Thule site is on the very edge of the treacherous Greenland ice cap. And the site at Fylingdales is over 200 miles north of London, England, in a location that completes the northward coverage for ICBM over the North Pole and extends southeast detection down through Europe against a mid-continental missile attack. It also overlaps the west edge of the Thule BMEWS radar. BMEWS is fine for detecting missiles, but not for detecting bombers. Bombers can fly in undetected beneath the BMEWS radar fan. But bombers can't get by the DEW line undetected. DEW stands for Distant Early Warning Line. The radars of the DEW line are designed for low and high-level air traffic surveillance. They are operated and maintained by the Federal Electric Corporation through contract with the United States Air Force. They are strategically placed along the Arctic Circle so that no bomber on an Arctic route can fly under, around, or over their search patterns. From Alaska, across the barren wilderness of the north, through Canada, and over the 10,000-foot thick ice cap of Greenland, more than 30 DEW line sites form a fence of electronic eyes 5,000 miles long. On the eastern end, it is tied into the surveillance systems of our NATO allies, through Iceland to Norway. No matter how isolated the site, no matter how long the Arctic days and nights around it, no matter how terrible the cold, every site of the DEW and BMEWS systems is a place where men must live, work, and survive under some of the strangest conditions in the world. On the Greenland ice cap, some DEW line buildings have to be jacked up as much as 10 feet a year to keep them above snow. The feet of the buildings are already 65 feet under snow, and yet each year, 6 more feet of snow pile up, and the buildings have to be jacked up again and again. The buildings are 5 stories above the level of the snow, so that the cold air can circulate underneath them. If there were no cold airspace underneath, the building would melt the ice beneath it with its own heat and quickly disappear into the ice cap. Where buildings are built on permafrost, the bottom of the buildings have to be air-conditioned to keep the heat from melting the permafrost. In a land where the wind can jump from 15 to 150 miles per hour in a few minutes, no man is safe. Wherever men travel, there are emergency huts by the roadside called phase shacks. These huts have a telephone, emergency food rations, and a gas stove. When a man must go out in a severe Arctic storm, he must take a buddy with him. No man goes out alone then.
The Wing Command Post has declared Thule Air Base to be in a Phase 3 condition. All personnel must be accounted for immediately. If you have been ordered to remain on duty, report your location to your barracks chief immediately. Thule Air Base is now in a Phase 3 condition.
The alert is also given in Danish.
Det meddeles nu fra hovedkvarteret, at Thulebasen er i.
This means that exposed flesh will freeze in 60 seconds. What kind of protection does this demand? First, thermal underwear, double socks, and regular clothes. On top of that, mukluks, quilted pants, mittens, parkas, and face mask. If a man omits any of these articles of clothing under these weather conditions, the Arctic winter in seconds can cripple or kill him. Survival is an iron discipline. One mistake, and a man dies. Doorknobs are plastic covering. Metal on a doorknob would freeze to the flesh of a man's hand. Under the worst conditions, if the power failed at some sites, even the men in the building could be frozen solid in 45 minutes. 99% of the time, there is no place to go except into the next room. The men fight boredom as well as the cold. Maintenance men become amateur carpenters. Mechanics become sound experts. Electricians become lapidarists, polishing semi-precious stones. And some men even raise tropical fish, or try to. But the principal work is watching the sky toward the North Pole.
Data, this is Council here.
Roger, Data here.
Yes, Data, could I have identification of the last tracker sent in, please?
Roger, that track is unknown at the moment. Continue 5-minute cycle tells on it.
Thank you, Data. This is Council out.
Roger, that out.
This constant watch is kept at places called Saglec, Melville at Goose Bay, Pinkersuet Mountain, Cape Dyer. But Arctic harbors are frozen solid for 9 months out of the year. Only in the summer can the Coast Guard and the Navy keep them open with icebreakers. On the voyage north, the vessels break through the ice pack and pass 200 and 300-foot icebergs. Structural damage to reinforced hulls is common. Sometimes the ice pack will close upon a ship. During whaling days, many ships were trapped in the ice and crushed by tremendous pressure. In 3 short months, ships of the United States Military Sea Transport Service must deliver most of the supplies for an entire year. The Army's 264th Transportation Company from Fort Eustis, Virginia, supplies stevedore support for the unloading operation at Thule. Beginning in July, approximately 200 men spend 3 months unloading vessels that supply Thule Air Base and other sites with everything from tea bags to 50-ton cranes. Every site has to be supplied with everything: eggs, antennas, and mail. Airlift must be used for the more remote sites. Aircraft operate from all types of landing surfaces. At Hoffen Naval Air Station, Iceland, a Navy C-47 must land on a gravel beach. Mail and supplies are then loaded on a fishing boat. After a trip across a small inlet, it'll be loaded onto trucks for the final 12 miles ride to the site. At Die 3, ski-equipped C-130s land on the Greenland ice cap. Every month of the year, the runway is an endless stretch of snow. It must be remembered that the eyes of the North form a defensive system, not an offensive system. The Air Defense Command of the United States Air Force supplies over 70% of the men and equipment that make up our Eyes of the North. Including aircraft to intercept enemy bombers. The Navy has powerful anti-submarine forces patrolling the Arctic seas. These are defensive forces, but BMEWS is our first line of warning in the North. If a missile threat occurs, automatic transmission circuits take over. The BMEWS rearward communications net is operated by a number of military and civilian organizations. The Canadian Marconi Company, one of these, relays this information. Information racing with an electronic speed of light from from BMEWS sites at Clear, Alaska, Thule, Greenland, and Fylingdales Moor, England, to the North American Air Defense Command, NORAD, the Underground Combat Operations Center located at Colorado Springs, Colorado. Voice communications back up this electronic radar warning.
NORAD, this is Fylingdales, Senior Duty Officer. We have one object in the coverage. I have 7 DTOs in the computer.
All BMEWS sites report in microseconds over a communications net equivalent to twice the distance around the equator. At the dew line, experienced eyes detect aircraft by a blip on a dew line radar scope. At a similar scope, at a direction center further south, a team of professionals plot its course, its approximate speed, its altitude. Radar sightings are compared with known air traffic. If the aircraft radar track fails to match a logged flight plan, it is declared unknown. NORAD Combat Operations Center gets the word.
Dew line station Delta Mike reports 4 unknowns bearing 360 degrees, 49,000 feet, tracking 200 degrees, ground speed 500.
At NORAD, the threat is analyzed. Military decisions are made. If massed missiles and bombers were reported, the entire free world could be instantly alerted.
Attention all NORAD regions. Commander-in-Chief NORAD declares Defense Condition 1. All region commanders will take necessary action to disperse all fighter forces. All weapons will go to Delta status immediately. Authenticate, please.
If it's a missile attack, there are only 15 minutes. If the threat is enemy bombers, there could be as much as several hours. This is the precious warning time the eyes of the North have given us. Enough time for every military installation in the United States and in every NATO nation to prepare for the attack and the counterattack. On the other hand, however small the threat, our defense is just as quick to react. United States Air Defense Command F-102s, standing by on 5-minute alert, scramble to investigate an unknown aircraft.
Red flight's ready for takeoff.
Red flight, wind 120 degrees at 10 knots, cleared for takeoff.
Red, roger.
The ground controller directs the flight into position.
Inkspot, this is Red Flight.
Red Flight, this is Inkspot 15. Read you loud and clear. How me?
Roger, loud and clear.
Roger, Red Flight. Vector 140, climb Angels 40, set speed liner.
Roger, Vector 140, Angels 40. Armament safety check complete.
Red Flight, I have your target bearing 13050.
Red Flight, contact. Inkspot, Red Flight. Target's the Soviet Badger. He is taking no evasive action.
This happens sometimes. We are being watched too, even as our Air Defense Command carries out its never-ending protective mission. In this vast expanse of the Arctic, even during winter's endless darkness, the unblinking eyes of our northern defense are always on the alert. Americans, Canadians, Greenlanders, Danes, Icelanders, and Englishmen in tactical operation rooms, on the flight line, in generator rooms, in kitchens, fight the cold and the boredom, manning the eyes of the North to give us maximum warning time to prepare, time to retaliate, minutes of priceless time.